So your pressurized fresh water comes up from the pump head outlet through this hose, through your 5 micron filter, which should be replaced every 60 to 80 hours, through your accumulator. This is a pressure transducer and it conveys the pressure in the system through to the panel. From here the seawater goes into your Watermaker module. On the top we have an amplifier which increases the system pressure from 8 to 52 bar, and in the bottom here we have 2 membranes through which the seawater is pushed and the fresh water is extracted, coming out through this blue pipe, through past the flow meter, past the salinity probe and into the diverter valve. When the unit is first started, the diverter valve is active or open and allows the freshwater product to be discharged into the brine discharge and overboard. Once the salinity is at the right level, the valve closes and diverts the freshwater product through this hose, which then ends up in the galley at the manifold. The system pressure is also indicated on this gauge. This is your brine discharge line. This is your decompression valve and should be opened up at half a turn to bleed in the air from the system. You also do that every 2 weeks or so because you have air coming into the system on a continual basis when you're traveling through the water. It'll air bubbles roll down the hull and get picked up by the pickup. In the unlikely event that the spools ended in the center position, the water coming from the pump physically can't go past this point. So we then need to mechanically move the spool over the center position. This will only occur if the unit is shut down outside of its normal operation. In order to do this, we need to open up the thumb screw by a full turn. We need to open up what we call the reset valve. This allows any water trapped in front of the spool when we push it across to expel itself. At most you're going to get a teaspoon of water out here. Then you turn the thumb screw a minimum of 10 turns in a clockwise direction. This forces the spool off the center position. Once it's tight and you've turned it to 10 turns, you then need to turn it all the way out.
You just keep turning until it's tight.
And just lock it in place. Okay? You then need to close the reset valve. If you don't, you get a continuous flow of seawater out here when the unit's running. Then you then go and start the unit and then come back here, and then once you've got expelled all the air out, you can then close the decompression valve. So that typically is just a half a turn. If it's a full turn for too long, the system won't see the correct pressure and will keep turning itself off.
Okay.
And just hand tight. Once you open it and the unit's running, you'll actually hear a hissing sound, and that's just the air or the pressure escaping through the decompression valve. When the decompression valve is open, you won't get any freshwater product. Okay, so when you come to replace any of the cartridges, so this goes for the active carbon filter in the white housing as well as the 5 micron in the orange filter housing, you need to open up the decompression valve with a full turn to make sure that you're not trying to undo the housing with residual pressure in the Watermaker. You then use the spanner and you rotate it in a clockwise direction to open the filter housing. You then wind the filter housing all the way down, replace your filter element, put a light smear of silicone on the O-rings, and then put the housing back in, screw it all the way up. Hand tight is normally sufficient.
Okay, and then we run the machine with the...
Then you start up using the startup procedure, again with the decompression valve in the open position, until prompted 1 minute or so after the startup of the automatic startup procedure to come and close this. You then close that in a clockwise direction. The automatic startup procedure takes about 2 minutes and will stop automatically. Once it stops, you can then start the unit in with the normal start functions and make water. Before you start the Watermaker, you need to make sure that your freshwater pump is on. So that breaker needs to be in the up position. because it utilizes your pressurized fresh water to bleed the system of any air before startup. The freshwater circuit runs through the active carbon filter, which should be replaced every 6 months, through a solenoid which is controlled by the Watermaker itself. That solenoid opens up whenever you press start for 15 seconds before the pump starts, and remains open for another 15 seconds after the pump has started. It also opens whenever you are performing the washing function. It then allows pressurized fresh water through into the T-piece, which then closing the non-return valve, and that fresh water is then conveyed to the pump head inlet. The pump head outlet then feeds through this high pressure hose through to the Watermaker module on the lazarette. Here we have a 24 volt 400 watt electric motor. We have the pump pressure switch, and we have a similar pressure switch on the Watermaker module, and between the two of these they do the pressure monitoring. Make sure that that valve is also open, that's from your pressurized freshwater line, and that the grey bore valve is open. The only time the grey bore valve will be closed is when you're changing the filter or when you're pickling the unit, because if it's left open you will get fresh water coming through into your bucket, additional fresh water. So you start using the start button. What I would recommend is once you've started it, you press the flushing button. It won't flush now until you come and press stop. Okay. So we have your battery voltage, your system pressure at 6 bar. Your salinity is okay. We're producing 103 liters an hour. The time that we've been running for thus far is 10 minutes. The system is running, and the model is a Zen 100. So when you press stop at the end of your production cycle, it automatically goes into a 1 minute freshwater flush and then stops automatically. But I'm going to start it again, so I'm going to stop this flushing process. The other way to start the unit is by programming the production time. So if you've worked out that every 2 days you need to run the Watermaker for 2 or 3 hours, you can change that. And now when you start using the production timer, it automatically puts the unit into a 2-hour run cycle. Again, you need to press flush, so that at the end of the 2 hours it will then automatically flush and turn itself off. So what's happening now is the seawater has been pumped through the Watermaker module. The diverter valve is diverting the water overboard to the discharge, and we're waiting for the salinity to get to the right level. You'll see that there's a residual of fresh water, so we're running only at 4 bar, and we're producing 119 liters. That will drop as the seawater component, or as the freshwater component is pushed out of the Watermaker. Things that will affect the pressure would be battery voltage, temperature of the seawater, and salinity of the seawater. Colder the seawater, the higher the pressure with a slightly lower output, because cold water is more dense, so it requires more pressure to push it through the membrane. Okay, so now salinity has reached a K point, the diverter valve is closed, and the freshwater product is now going through to the manifold in the galley. We now have 1 hour and 58 minutes remaining. So when that gets down to 0 minutes, it will automatically flush for a minute and turn itself off. So the procedure to start it up whenever you introduce air in the system is you use what we call the startup procedure. And this uses a combination of your pressurized freshwater system to feed the system of air. Production timer, automatic startup. So we'll start that now. With open pressure valve. That's the decompression valve on top of the unit. I did leave it open, so I'm not going to worry to go and open it now. So this lasts for just under 2 minutes, and with about 50 seconds remaining it will prompt us to go and close the decompression valve. cycle between freshwater open and freshwater closed, expelling all the air from the system. And this you would use whenever you introduce air into the system, for the sake when you change the filter. Okay. On the second menu page we have bypass switch and bypass valve. Bypass switch bypasses the pressure switch, so pressure monitoring of the system, and bypass valve bypasses the diverter valve. So this would typically be used when you're pickling. If you don't bypass the valve, it will keep looking for the correct salinity, which it won't find because you're using a mild acid as a pickling solution. It will then keep turning the unit off, and it will keep pumping your product, your pickling product, into the brine discharge, which comes back to your bucket in any case, but it will keep turning the unit off. Again, because we're going to open up the decompression valve when we pickle the unit, if you don't select the bypass switch, it won't see the required pressure and it will keep turning off.
Okay, so those two got to be on for the pickling.
They do. The default is off.
Okay. Okay.
So these micro switches perform the functions of the Watermaker and can be used in the event that the communication between the computer board and the panel is lost. The top micro switch activates the pump, so pushing it down, default is down is off. By pushing it up, we'll be able to start the pump. The middle one activates the bypass function when it's up, and the bottom one activates the solenoid valve for your freshwater flushing. So when it's up, you'll start, if you haven't started the pump yet, but you'll see that this line's filling up with fresh water now. And that's the brine discharge line. Okay. So if you were to, the normal operation to start this Watermaker using the micro switches would be, you push that up, 15 seconds later you push the pump up, 15 seconds later you push the this micro switch down to close the solenoid. Now you'll be sucking seawater through the unit and making fresh water. When you come to stop the unit, you would then flick the solenoid valve up so that the fresh water is now going to flood the system. That you'll leave like that for a minute with the pump in the top position. After a minute, push this, shut the pump off by pushing the lever down, and then shut the solenoid off by pushing that lever down. That would be the same as if you were using the panel to make water.
Okay, so it's just run it manually. Yeah.
Correct. So always make sure that one or both of your tanks are open before starting the Watermaker.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it builds up pressure in this blue pipe. This comes from the Watermaker in the lazarette, and this pipe, what happens is it will burst at about 8 bar. So the fresh water has to have somewhere to go.
Okay, so one or both of the tanks need to be
so
open.
the interesting thing is, on these boats, if you leave both open, the water automatically goes to the closest tank, which happens to be port. So if you leave the Watermaker running and you overfill the port tank, the water will automatically go through to the starboard tank, because the breathers for both tanks are above this point, which is quite handy.
Yeah, so we can just leave them both open.
Just leave them both open. Yeah. So when you come to pickle the unit, if you're leaving the unit for longer than 3 months without use, or if you at least once a year as a descaling agent, you need to close this valve, which is your brine discharge. So in line like this, facing fore and aft, it's open. When it's a thawed ships, it's closed. So that's open. You need to close that valve to prevent your solution from being discharged overboard. You then need to orientate this red valve, which is your suction from your bucket, this red valve, which is the discharge back into your bucket. Both of these need to be horizontal, but before you do that, you need to close your seacock, which will then also be horizontal. So all three of these levers would now be horizontal for pickling, and for normal operation would all be vertical.
Okay, and there's our Watermaker seawater strainer, which needs to be regularly cleaned out.
Correct. And that you need to close the seacock first, undo the bowl, clean it out, tighten it, but not too tight. Open up the seacock, bleed any air out, just by cracking the bowl clockwise. Allow the seawater to flood that air out, and then you can close it again. That way we're just limiting as much air as possible going through to the pump head.